Good evening. Let's call the meeting to order, please. Today is April the 10th. We're here at the Civic Center for our regular monthly meeting. We'll stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. McLaughlin.
Here.
Ms. Albrecht.
Here.
Mayor Kathy.
Here.
Mr. Wallace.
Yeah.
Mr. Putnam.
Here.
I'll defer to later. Anybody, Rex, you have anything?
No, sir.
No.
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 Okay, moving right on then to citizens' comments. Do we have any citizens' comments at this time? Okay. Before we get to the consent agenda, we're going to have a presentation by our police chief. Chief, why don't you take this over and
If I can get Fire Chief Simmons, volunteer firefighter Adrian Welly, volunteer firefighter Nathan Yaruso, you can stand right up here in front and center, Sergeant Foster and Sergeant McSweeney, please come to the front. Yes, you did. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make an account of couple of medical events that have occurred over the last year that the officers of Mexico Beach definitely need to be recognized for. I'm going to read a statement that I've put together from the case reports. Starting on April the 7th, 2017, Sergeant Foster responded to an address in Mexico Beach in reference to a medical emergency dealing with a female that had full thickness burns of approximately 50% of her body from a kitchen fire. Sergeant Foster conducted life-saving medical assistance in aiding in first aid, along with keeping an extreme cool, calm, and collective manner, maintaining the victim's life until additional medical assistance arrived. Due to life-saving efforts of Sergeant Foster, I'd like to personally present Sergeant Foster with a life-saving award. Fire Chief Danny Simmons, volunteer firefighter Adrian Welly, volunteer firefighter Nathan Yaruso, and Sergeant Richard McSweeney on January the 22nd, 2018, responded to an address also here in Mexico Beach in reference to a medical emergency. Upon arrival, they located the victim that was unresponsive. First responders provided CPR along with life-saving techniques until Gulf County EMS arrived and continued with life-advanced saving techniques. Through the efforts of these four officers, they maintained the life of the individual that was at that residence. So I'd like to thank Chief Simmons, Firefighter Weller, Firefighter Yaruso, and Sergeant McSweeney. I'd like to offer them also with a life-saving award. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. And if I could one more time, give a round of applause for all that. Thank you. Thank you.
thank you, Chief. And thank you, gentlemen, for your service. Under the consent agenda, we have one set of minutes from March 27th. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
We have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
Any corrections or additions? Any opposition? Let the record reflect, motion carried 5-0. Jeff?
Good evening, Jeff Britton with Dewberry. Short set of updates this evening, and then I dropped off a proposal for each of you. Also emailed it over to you. We'll go over that last. Alternate water supply. We still have another well that we need to install, but we're waiting until we figure out our final project location before we install that well. That's going to be a larger well, probably 8-inch range. So when we determine whether we're going to move forward with the Wallace site or a different site within the city, that'll be the next step.
Excuse me, an 8-inch well?
Yes, there'll be an 8-inch shallow well. Right now we've got a 4-inch deeper well. If we wind up moving to a different site, we'll probably have a 6-inch deep well to the depth we're at now, around 890 feet. And then the 8-inch shallower well.
Was that part of the initial plan?
It'll be based on the population that we're trying to serve. So,
2 wells were never part of the, were 2 wells?
two wells were part of the original
Were part
plan.
of the, okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The beach renourishment project, the environmental assessment is about 25% complete at this time. The field survey work was completed April 9th. The crews might come back out to pick up some areas of interest if when we get into design we decide we need a little more area covered, they might be back out for that. The paving projects, we have 2 permits that are ready to issue by DEP for the CCCO permit. The third project, 33rd Street, there's a question on the boardwalk. The reviewer is not sure if what part's existing versus what part is proposed new. The existing boardwalk gets stubbed back as we extend that street. So that's the last thing holding that up. 15th Street sidewalks, the application is in for grant funding. We have not heard anything further on it. The proposal that you have in front of you is something that Philip touched on a few months ago about the design of stormwater improvements in the New Mexico Street, Colorado Street, 5th Street area between Maryland and 15th Street. We've done some survey work out there in the right-of-way areas. This proposal will take the project from its current state, just being surveyed, all the way to construction docs and bidding, ready to hiring a contractor. The price tag for that, we have 3 separate tasks, and I can get into these details more, but up front, geotechnical services, which is the soils exploration, water table elevations, $1,500. Engineering services, which is the actual basin delineation, definition, and study, and hydraulic design, which is the sizing of the pipes for the stormwater, the storm event that we're going to accommodate. That total is $23,450. And then the bidding services, which are putting together the contract documents, specifications, and putting the project out for bid, hosting a pre-bid meeting on site, bid review, tabulation, and working with the city on award. That total is $4,500. The largest one there is the engineering design, and just to walk everybody through what that entails. We've got our survey data in the right-of-way areas, and everybody's familiar with this area. It's incredibly flat. The contours in the northeast corner of the project and the southeast corner of the project are right about 12. So we're dealing with a pretty flat area that's been raised up in some places in the middle where the homes are. So we're going to use LiDAR data for the residential areas in between the streets, and that's elevation data that we'll use to delineate where the grade break lines are, how much of the water is coming towards which street, where we're going to be picking up the different amounts of water where it's naturally going to flow in its current condition. So we'll perform the hydrologic study, basically defining the basins and determining how much water is coming to the street that we need to be able to capture and convey to the existing culverts in Maryland. Then we'll do a hydraulic analysis to size the pipes, taking into account the tailwater, which in this case is the tailwater all the way down to the 8th Street Canal, which is the ultimate discharge prior to discharging to the Gulf. In doing that, we'll analyze several different storm systems or storm events to see what the max storm is we're going to be able to accommodate. Something that throws some folks off occasionally is typically you design your storm infrastructure for about a 10-year storm event, 10-year, 1 hour, or 2 hour, because that's where your heaviest intensity of a storm occurs. And in your 25-year and your 100-year, you're going to get more volume, but as far as on a per hour basis, a 10-year, 1 hour storm event is usually what you design your infrastructure for. In preliminary estimates based on the stormwater master plan that's been done in the past, we think we're going to be able to accommodate that 10-year storm event. Based on our findings from our hydrologic study and our hydraulic analysis, we'll put together a stormwater report and prepare construction drawings that support that. Then this part of the project will come and give an update to the council and talk through all of our findings and all of our approaches, the whole time working with Philip and his crew to get a project and a cost point that works for the city's budget, whether it winds up being 1, 2, or 3 phases. That, that's how the city needs to break it down cost-wise, and that's how we'll break it down in the construction documents. If it's all able to be done in one phase, then that's how it'll be presented in the construction documents. And that's really the gist of the engineering design. Any questions or concerns?
Phil, a couple of years ago, what area of town did we stormwater? We did some on 15th Street.
We did one on 15th Street.
Just 15th Street? It did not encompass any of the,
We installed a baffle box at the end of the Maryland drainage easement. That's the only place that we deviated from off 15th Street.
the reason I ask, the area that's Jeff's speaking of, this triangle piece here, is it practical to look at such a small area in terms of, there's the whole back end of the city has had drainage problems for years.
I think right now, I worked in the road department for several years, and this area has little to zero stormwater as it sits right now. And the little bit that it does have, I can tell you with 100% certainty that it don't work. So I think this is right now our most problematic area, because I don't know how much it's going to cost to do it, but I do know that nothing's cheap, and that was one of the main reasons why I wanted to keep it to these 3 roads.
Oh, I understand, but this is just studying. I'm concerned. Are we studying enough? Are we studying enough of an area?
I think so.
A good plan for construction.
I think so, because if you go to the westward side of Colorado, you have 7th Street that butts up to that, which we can wrap all that down 7th Street. So I think we're doing the right thing.
Okay, and I noticed, Jeff, on this, it says things that exclusions is permitting. What's involved with permitting for stormwater?
Well, since we're not, there's not a part of this to develop a new stormwater management facility. So what we're doing here is just city maintenance on the existing stormwater management system that's out there. There's already a series of ditches and pipes that are there. Some of them noted on the survey as being crushed or damaged, like Philip touched on, and I don't know if you've all been out there during storm events, but it backs up and it just takes a while for the water to get out of there. So again, it's an exemption for stormwater permitting in that we're just installing infrastructure under city maintenance. We're not doing any new ponds.
Okay, and the purpose of this presentation is an expectation for a decision tonight? Is that where we are?
If you're comfortable with having a vote on it tonight, ultimately it gets back to the schedule. The sooner we get started, the sooner the improvements get done, but the city's got to feel comfortable with it as well.
Budget?
After listening to Adrian, I was 100% positive I had clarified that, but now I'm not so sure, so I would recommend to not vote on it.
So that means it's not budget. Appreciate it.
Sure thing.
Yes, you may ask a question. Please come up.
Connie Reisinger, 504 Maryland. To solve this problem, are you going to be digging ditches?
All I say is I don't have anything here that tells us what we're gonna do. So I don't know. Go ahead, Jeff. Yeah.
There's a blurb in there about the intent of the design is to have a closed system. That's
Thank you.
with pipes and
Okay.
inlets.
I was going to pay for my own if it had to.
Worst case scenario, if we had to ditch a certain stretch
Right.
just to manage it, we would, but
Okay.
that's not the intent of the
Okay,
project.
that's great.
Thank you. Before we leave this, council, is there, it's not a budgeted item, so I feel like it's appropriate to either table it or if somebody wants to do something different until we have, what was it, $30,000?
No, I think we need to figure out how we're gonna pay for it.
Okay. All right, so
So once we vote on it, how long does it take to get the ball rolling?
We've got the survey data, so we can begin preparing basin maps. The next step would be downloading the LiDAR data into AutoCAD, then defining your basins based on elevations, and then, I mean, that's something that could be started as soon as we get a notice to proceed. So,
I understand the engineering services, I don't have as much trouble with that as I do the bidding service. $4,500 to bid it. Dewberry does this?
yes, and if you've seen the bid documents, they can wind up being about this thick between the contract documents and the different specifications that go with it.
You're right, I forgot about that.
So that's where the heavy lifting is there.
Okay,
So we'll just put this ball
In our court, yes, sir.
in your court. Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. Okay. Department reports. Chief Kelly.
Yes, sir. March of 2018, the Mexico Beach Police Department responded to 418 calls for service, along with conducting 3,848 building and security checks, 99 traffic stops in the past 31 days. Of the 99 traffic stops, there were 22 citations issued and 62 warning citations issued. There were 8 arrests, and the arrests consisted of a subject arrested for grand theft auto resulting from a DUI. Another subject was arrested for driving with expired license with knowledge over a year of driving with expired license. An illegal brandishing of a firearm that was also caught on store surveillance camera at the express lane. Driving while license suspended, possession of controlled substances, 2 subjects arrested for that. Domestic battery involving a child abuse arrest, and 2 arrests on warrants. We had 9 complaint of animal calls, 4 theft reports, 18 suspicious vehicles stops, 14 suspicious person contacts, 8 vehicle accidents without injury, and 11 noise complaints. This time last year, we had 340 calls for service at this month for this time of year. This year, we had 418. Last year's call for service total was 860, and right now we're at 1,122 calls for service. And that is all that I have. Do you have any questions?
Noise complaints was one place, or is that scattered all over town?
Couple complaints we're getting from Toucans. There was one incident where the DJ was not playing the kind of music, I guess, that the management required or asked for. So he ended up leaving, shutting their music down, and we had a couple complaints from across the street saying that the music was too loud. We do have a decibel reader. We have had, and we'll continue to use it on weekends, but the decibel reader has not indicated that it's a level beyond. However, living right there across the street in the Horseshoe, you're going to get reverb from the water, from a swimming pool, and it is, depending on the type of music and the elevation of the music, you're going to get noise. And as we politely explained to the persons calling, Toucans was there when they moved in, unfortunately. So we kind of like have to walk very gentle when we kind of say that and try to make them as comfortable, because it's not like either of them are going to go anywhere anytime soon. And if they're not violating the noise decimal complaint, you're real restricted on what you can do other than going back across the street. And majority of the times they turn it down. But it's just particular songs have a certain bass level that reverb.
Any questions for the chief? From our citizens? Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it. I guess you're glad that spring break doesn't last 2 months, huh?
We did have one incident. A couple young men were on a golf cart driving down 14th Street and flipped over the golf cart, and they greeted the officer being 16 years of age with a beer can in each hand. So we notified their parents accordingly, and so now we're not going to miss that.
There you go. Chief Simmons?
Yes, sir. Today was a good day for ISO. We spoke with them. I gave the April update early. He is happy to hear we're on track. Our score is going to go from a 10 to a 6. In July, he wants the final documents from me, and that's when they'll publish it. You know, like I said, we're at 10 now, but it's unpublished. He will publish our 6 in July as we have the full-timers. I'll submit that roster and then the training documents, but everything's on par. He's happy with the plan to see it pass like we've implemented it. So I just got that news before the meeting. It's not on my report. Several improvements have been made this month. We're still working on the remodeling of the station. We got several bids coming in. We'll hope to award next council meeting for the roof, and then Gulf Coast Asphalt's quoting stormwater repairs today. We started the beach patrol with the Yamaha Viking UTV that the volunteers raised the money for. That's been a good program so far. Helped out a few people that didn't call right away, some ankle fractures, simple things. Sea-Doo just notified me that the free personal watercraft they're going to loan us for water rescues came in. There was a call recently, we could have used it on a missing kayaker. We should have that by next week. That's a completely free program, doesn't cost us any money, and every year we get a new one, so there's no maintenance. And for any type of boating incidents, so you'll probably see us training next week on that. It's about 40 hours of training to get everybody certified to operate it. Other than that, we're just staying on track. We're trying to get the station. We posted internally for positions for the fire department, and we will try to fill based off our volunteer roster first, and then after that, toward the end of April, we'll post externally for the remaining positions that we don't fill.
Okay. Questions? Chief? Fire Chief? Any comments or questions for Chief Simmons? Thank you, sir. Mr. Phillip?
I'm waiting there.
I know you are. I've been checking on it.
Just a couple things I want to touch on. You'll notice if you look at the water, we have used 7 million this past month compared to just over 12 million this time last year. So there got a little bit of a difference there. And if you go down to the sanitation, we actually picked up 20,000 pounds less this year than what we did this time last year. Although it doesn't seem like that, because the guys just this past week picked up over 100,000 pounds just last week. But we've seen it looks like we're going to come in short again this month as we did this time last year. Beyond that, as I hope everybody knows, the pavilion down at the canal is open to the public, ready for use. And we were able to get half a slab poured this morning through all that downpour for the fish cleaning station, so we're moving forward on that. And getting ready for the grass cutting season. Yes.
Pavilion looks nice with the tables under there.
They did an absolutely wonderful job.
Looks nice.
Well, what would have happened last year, based on even years prior, to go to over 12 million gallons of water? Is there an
Population influx. I would have to go back because we did have those 2 10-inch water breaks. That could have been a part of it. And I actually, if you go down there to the bottom of your water graph here, I tried to, anything out of the ordinary, I tried
Yeah,
to put down in
I
there.
saw that.
Obviously, I have not done that, but I will double check with Mary to see if that was around about that time. I believe it was. We had those 2 10-inch breaks.
Info.
But the sewer side is always a month behind. So I don't have last month on there just yet.
Any question for Public Works? Thank you very much. Mr. Clerk?
All right, in your packet is the February report financially. A couple things I want to draw attention to is the first one right on top, revenue. Why have we collected so much more revenue this year versus this time last year? And that is simply because of the grant projects that were going on last year. Our budget was much higher, so it skews that percentage. On the back page, there's a couple of new categories. I've added the pier fund, the infrastructure surtax, and I think the boat ramp was on there before. Also recalculating how we allocate interest. So all of our money's in the same account. We get one interest payment. It had always been split between our 5 big accounts: water, sewer, garbage, general fund, and then utility tax fund. I have restructured it now where all the funds are going to collect the interest. I mean, every fund is in there, so every fund should collect their portion of the interest. And then the water operating, you'll see, has finally gone positive. We've gotten our reimbursement on the alternate water source, which has brought that fund back out of the negative. I know it seems like it's too soon, but we're in April. I've begun the fiscal year 19 budget prep. So any budgetary requests for next year for capital that the council may have, we talked to the staff meeting this morning, send them in, where I'm going to start compiling and getting some things done. One of the things I've been working on is the fire assessment. By self-funding the fire truck purchase ourselves and not paying interest, we should be able to take the savings off there from this year and for the budget for next year and slightly lower that assessment from what was originally proposed. I think it'll be even more than that, pending where we end this year, based on other things, but I don't know what that's going to be. I haven't projected that out. And the last thing I wanted the public to know and the council to know is we have posted 14 positions within the city at this moment. We have an opening in Road and Street for a full-time employee due to the departure of Travis, who will be going to Gulf County. We have 2 Road and Street seasonal positions that are posted, which is our summer help that we do every year. We posted a sanitation opening. Willie from Utilities will be leaving us as well, moving to South Florida. One of the sanitation guys is going to go over and take that position, which opens a sanitation position. There are 2 sanitation seasonal positions open. Our code enforcement position is open. Our harbor master is leaving the end of this month, and that position is open. And then, as he talked about earlier, the fire department. We have posted that internally to give our volunteers a shot first, as they've stuck through us as volunteers. There will not be 6 out of that bunch, so we will post that externally when that closes. And that is what I have.
Okay. Question? The surtax is the half-cent sales tax
Correct.
coming from the county, and the 92,000 is that what we budgeted? Or I'm trying to, that's what's in the fund?
That's what's in the fund total since we began collecting of the surtax. That is how much has
Well,
been
we've only,
collected.
you collect that monthly?
Yes, it comes in monthly.
Did we collect it last year?
It started, and I believe it was March of last year was our first payment.
Okay, and
So-
that is set aside,
Dedicated to.
dedicated to, okay. And the boat ramp fund, is it paid for, is this number, there's still money?
This is previous to any transfers. This is cash that is on hand, but with the cooler and that has not come out of that yet.
That has not come out?
No.
Okay.
But the infrastructure surtax has not expended anything, so that is everything that has been collected.
From the time it started, not this
Correct.
year, but from the
Correct.
time it started?
Yes.
Questions for the clerk? Appreciate it. Mel?
As a resident who lives across the street from Toucans, let the record show I'm not the one who complained about the noise.
We were checking the tape.
Yeah, you can check the records of the police department, I'm clear. On the 24th meeting, coming up in 2 weeks, that's our 9 a.m. meeting, we will have Alera, who was our consultant for the comp plan, as well as our P&Z chair, Jim Bush, will be here to update the council on where we are in the comprehensive plan process. That way, they'll present what we've gotten done so far, and you can ask questions and kind of be in the loop. That is still on par for being done around the first part of June. So we're looking forward to getting that behind us. And of course, you folks make the ultimate vote on whether to approve it or not. So even though the P&Z is carrying the laboring oar on getting the work done, ultimately you folks have to approve it after they do. That being said, that is partially funded by a technical assistant grant we got from DEO. And now that that grant cycle has come up again, we can apply for an additional technical assistant grant to help us to help rewrite the LDR. Because you know the LDR is based on the comp plan. And we do have a lot of instances where the LDR is not quite as clear as it should be. So we want to, if it's okay with the council, I'll make the application for a new technical assistance grant to help partially fund the LDR rewrite.
Okay, you need the nod, we need the vote.
I don't really need anything. If no one jumps up and down and screams not to do it, I won't do it, but
All right.
I'll go ahead and proceed and apply for the grant. Deadline is like May the 9th or something, so I've got a little bit of time. Also, we need to talk about the adult playground. Recall that we have the FERDAP grant for $50,000. The original intent, scope of work was for either a splash pad or an adult playground at Parker Park. We all determined a splash pad was not the way to go, so we need to do the adult playground. Philip has sent around some sketches about what would encompass an adult playground, and so we just need council direction as where to go from here. Should we decide not to put in the adult playground, we can simply not claim the $50,000 FERDAP grant, apply at the next cycle for a pavilion, which I think most people would agree might be more of a desire than an adult playground. But that's not a Melsa Migelski decision to make. We did have Jeff check with, Jeff as in Jeff, Mr. Dewberry, check with the grant people, and if we decide to give this grant back, we are not penalized for future grants. In other words, they won't hold it against us. So where should we go with the adult playground?
But we don't have the possibility of next grant being twice as much either.
No, 50,000 is about all we're gonna get, and a pavilion could quite possibly cost much more than 50,000.
If you give it back, it doesn't increase your chances of getting another one either, does it?
Doesn't increase or decrease your chances. It's based on what you apply for.
Well, I think this is free money. We don't have to put anything towards it. I don't know that we need 9 or 10 pieces. Even a couple, I just think would be nice. Since it's free money, it's something that could be used. If we had to pay for it, I probably would say no. Yes, I like the pavilion idea, but that's not an option this year. So I'm still for a couple of pieces of adult equipment up there.
What's the deadline?
We have,
Tonight.
well, we're embarking on the point where the state's getting a little nervous that we've not had any action at all. So they want us to, I'm not going to use slang, I'm just going to say they're pushing us to make a decision.
Well, since I'm an expert on adult exercise equipment, I'd be glad to help you get it done next week. Any comments on that?
Well, how many pieces can we afford with 50,000?
I sent everybody out a, I don't know what you would call it,
Yeah.
an email that had numerous pieces of equipment in it and all
All
kinds of
those
different
different
things.
things?
That was gonna fit within our $50,000 budget. It was an enormous amount of items.
Equipment. Okay.
Yeah, plus I have another brochure too, that we can look at. No, I think we should use it.
Can we place it where it doesn't interfere with a lot of projects going on? The hedges,
No, I think we want to put it right in the middle of everything.
Right next to the bathroom.
Next to the bathroom. But chances are they could be movable. Some things have to be set in concrete, but we could keep that in mind.
I know it was mentioned last time, putting it towards the back. I personally wouldn't want it in the back. I like it, and I understand, Jeff says, no, this isn't the best place, Linda, but I like it under that tree, just as you're coming up the road, because it's really not in anybody's way there. It's not taking up any parking area. The festivals that we have, you bring chairs, and so you just sit around that area, but and I know that they say, the tree's there and it hurts the machines, et cetera, but I think the shade helps too.
I'm for giving it back. I think the park is too valuable to us to have free money, which always bothers me. And until we can develop what we need, I don't see that as a need. I don't see it as part of taking a chance of putting something up there because it's free. I'm more for putting something up there that we need and would be beneficial and make the park look good. I don't think adult playground equipment is an asset to that area.
If we used it, would that mean we wouldn't be able to put in for the grant next year for pavilion?
Luckily, you can have 3 grants out at the same time, and we're finishing up the grant for municipal park. So that opens up a slot. So we could conceivably get another grant for the same park, but a different pot of money. So far, it's clear as mud.
Well, you want to make a decision on that tonight?
I don't think we have to make a decision tonight, do we?
Well, good, let's put it on.
I think
So you want to make a decision whether we accept the grant or we don't? Is that what you're saying, Al?
Well, we've already got a contract with the
No.
state.
Right.
that
So
we
we
accept.
have the grant, are we going to use it?
Well,
It's
that's
not
what I meant.
accepting it, it's a matter of,
That's what I meant.
and the only thing we can put there is what we applied for when it was
Right.
asked for.
Right.
And so if we're gonna follow through with that, then that's really what, I think what Mel needs to know. Are we gonna follow through, or are we gonna say, look, we gonna rethink this and we're not gonna follow through? We're gonna,
I think we need to look again at the brochure that he passed out, and some that I might have that I could leave, that we could come in at different times and check them out during the week and see if there's anything worthwhile in that group of things. I think when you lose 50,000, you lose 50,000. I'm not necessarily on board with the fact that we couldn't use it. It just makes a difference on what it is. Just because it's adult exercising equipment, it may not be as bad as it sounds.
Depends on how much you exercise.
Well, if it brings more people to the park and the number of people using the sidewalk, there's a lot of people doing some exercising around here, walking. I've seen it in locations where it's like stations. You do your walking, you come and you do your stations. I think if you could put it somewhere where it doesn't interfere, and the thing we need to, be positive of, or if it's going to be used. I don't have a problem with it. I would use it while I walk. It would be fun, something to stop and do some different exercises than just walk and strength things.
Well, and I know, and I think you all know, a couple of people here in the vicinity that are experts on exercise equipment and exercise, because they have classes all the time. And I think we probably need to talk to one of them, let them see what we're thinking about, because they probably know more about exercise equipment than we do, for suggestions.
okay?
We can do this in the next few days.
Right, so could we go into the office and look at what you're suggesting, and somebody contact these
Yeah,
experts?
we can't be in there at the same time, you
No, I know.
understand?
We never are anyhow.
Yeah.
Well, then we'll put it on the
Next agenda.
next agenda for decision, how's it?
Okay.
Keep in mind, one of the biggest problems from the staff's perspective is where to put it. We want to make sure we don't interfere with anything that the CDC and special events do.
CDC? Okay.
Right.
All right, put it on the agenda, make that an agenda item.
And the last thing I have, Your Honor, is the monthly update on building permits. You can see that so far this year, we've got 18 building permits for a new single-family home. We have one permit for a triplex, so that's 21 living units so far in just the first 3 months. That means more trash for Phillips guys to pick up.
Yep.
Okay, I want to ask you about your conversation with the county manager on the CRA.
Sure. I had expressed to the county manager, as well as my fellow city managers from around the county, that we had an economic development discussion at the city council level, and there was great interest on doing some things to better ourselves. And one of the things that really was of interest to the board was the CRA, which is the Community Redevelopment Agency. And what that encompasses a TIF district, which means taxes for the increase of the valuation of your home would go to the city instead of the county and the school. The conversation led that the school district is exempt from CRA, so we would not get that increment. But also when it came to the county's portion of the increment, the county looks disfavorably on CRAs because they feel they're entitled to that money, because when there's expansion and more building and more development, that creates a burden on the county constitutional offices. In other words, more people are here, the more people who are going to be using, the tag office, the clerk's office, the courts, things of that sort. So they feel that they're entitled to that money. So at best, we could expect maybe, this is just a guess, roughly 50% of the county's portion of that increment, which in essence then makes the the worth of the CRA, maybe not as much as we had anticipated when we first spoke about it. Doesn't mean we can't do it, it just won't be as much money as we had anticipated.
Right. Does the council have any objection if we make a formal request to the county? This was done at a meeting where there were county managers and county and city. Is there any objection to drafting a letter to the Board of County Commissioners, making a formal request so that we see what they have to say more officially than this?
I don't have a problem with that.
No, good idea.
That's fine. Have it in writing.
Yeah.
I'm going to draft a letter. I'll get with you.
Okay.
And just, I think there's merit to having something on file of their position. Other than, I mean, I sort of thought Bob would think they're not favorable to have. But we don't think it's favorable the way the distribution of the funds are either, so.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, all right, well then, well, that'll just be nothing more than I'll send you something and you and I can tweak it.
Sure.
Something quickly to add.
Sure.
That's a great idea, because before you could really advance into the process very far to try to figure out if you're able to establish a CRA, you're going to have to do a study, which is going to cost some money. So if you know the county's position up front, it'll help you decide whether it's worthwhile to spend that money when you find out exactly how much it is.
Do you have anything, while we're on reports, do you have anything that?
Something very briefly. We've already noticed a meeting for tomorrow, 3 o'clock. It's going to begin as a brief public meeting and then go to closed session to discuss litigation. The attorneys need your advice on the Vasquez litigation that's ongoing. I'm on the notice as attending. I'm not actually planning to attend, though, to save you some money, unless anyone here tonight says, no, Nick, come and be a participant. Cole Davis will be here. He's leading that litigation. He'll handle the meeting. If either way, he'll primarily be handling the meeting.
Okay. Is there a need for, does anyone feel the need that we have both here?
No.
No.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else? I'm sorry, man, anything else?
Yeah,
No, you're done, okay. All right, moving on, we have the second reading of ordinance 688. Chair will entertain a motion to read by title only.
So moved.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any opposition to reading? Mr. Clerk?
Ordinance number 688, an ordinance of the City of Mexico Beach, Florida, prohibiting businesses from operating on the beach without a beach vending permit, providing an exception for businesses meeting specified conditions, providing definitions, providing beach vending permit approval process, providing permissible locations for activities conducted under a beach vending permit, providing permissible activities under a beach vending permit, prohibiting heavy wooden lounger-style chairs on the beach after September 30th, 2018, providing a limited exception to leave no trace for holders of beach vending permits, repealing ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict, providing for codification, and providing for an immediately effective date.
Thank you. Is there a motion for adoption of ordinance 688?
So moved.
We have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Any comments from our citizens? Call the roll, please.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Ms. Albrecht?
Yes.
Mayor Kathy?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Putnam?
Yes.
Accessory structures, Mr. McLaughlin.
It's something that's come up, well, accessory structures have come up a lot, but the reason I put it here, I'd like to get some kind of direction, if we can, of where we're going, what we would like. Enforcing accessory structures in the past, and I think in the future, is a difficult thing for us. I know currently, right now, we have about 10 structures probably that are not in compliant. You know, letters have gone out to these particular people. I can think of two things going on right now that reminded me of problems in accessory structures. We have a pole barn, most of us know, that was supposed to be attached to a house. It's, I think, big enough that the house could go under, at least it looks that way to me. And it's sitting in the middle of the person's property now, and it's being, I know, looked at and taken care of, but it got quite a ways before we evidently caught. And then use an example of what can happen. I've got a neighbor, New Mexico. He's doing it properly. He's has a pole barn for several years. He just happens to be right now in the process of walling it in, closing it in. And that's where I think one of the problems with accessory structures happens. Once you have a structure that has 4 walls on it, it's terribly difficult to see what can happen. Almost anything can be built. And it's private property, so we just can't go jumping in there. There are 2 issues, I think, with our accessory structures right now. One of the big ones, of course, is rentals. We have a lot of people that don't want to rent. We have people that want to rent. We are a tourist town, so we're used to rentals. We have rental houses all the way through the neighborhoods. We're also a family town. I think that's an issue that would have to be taken care of if we move forward. Decide maybe that the city attorney could come up with some language that's acceptable that says if you have an accessory structure that's capable of renting and living in, you can't do it. Or maybe if we can't do it that way, change or add to the ordinance that there's some things you have to do before you are allowed to rent that possibly would make it a little harder for people just off the top of their head say, I'm going to put it on B&B and go. I am concerned with the present. We have houses or accessory structures that are being used, if nothing else, as guest houses, or in some cases purchased to be used as mother-in-law suites, a generic term for I have a relative that is ill that we need to take care of, and in this day and age, that's something that's there. And the way we have it set up now to, I think, keep from having people rent out structures, we are actually not allowing our citizens that have houses to utilize their property in a way they can take care of their family. Or in my case, I had children that decided to come back for 6 months every once in a while. Would have rather had them in a guest house than have them with me. However, probably having them with me in my house, they left sooner, so there are benefits both ways. But we're not allowing or giving our citizens, I think, because we are trying to keep from renting, keeping anything like an accessory structure that can be lived in attached to a home, the ability to take care of a family member if there's a need, and those needs do occur. I think also as a family city in the past, I know I have one down on 5th Street that is kind of a family compound. Right now there are structures outside or RVs that have been there for at least the amount of time I've been here, and it's been good. I've enjoyed watching the family come in. When I moved here, their children were probably 2, 3 years old, toddlers. Don't know them well, spoken to them, but it's been kind of fun watching the kids grow and seeing the family have fun and enjoy on the weekends. I have one across the street recently that's been purchased, and they're doing that. I think that's an enhancement to our city, to allow the families to be families. It's great on 4th of July to see the families out on the beach, not just individuals. So I think we need to, I'd like to see us get a direction to allow us to, frankly, have accessory buildings that we can sleep in, live in if we have to for our grandchildren when they come in, and not be against our regulations. If we have a family member that needs help, we can construct something on that. And then if we do not want to have these structures rented, have something in our ordinances that is plain. A lot of ordinances that was mentioned tonight tend to be a little bit hard to understand sometimes. We're in a society that we have to use pictures on our streets instead of words to tell people what to do. So I think anything we can do to make it plain what the city wants and what our citizens can do and potential citizens can do when they come in to purchase an existing home, to easily know what their rights are and to help our real estate people certainly as they try and market that home, have a good understanding of what we do.
Well, the real estate people haven't always explained what the situation is.
That's true.
And that's been going on for years.
Yep.
And I don't know whose fault that is. I think the city has to accept some of that, and the real estate people have to accept some of that. And unfortunately, the new resident of town that doesn't realize what's going on is the victim to all of this.
They rely on their professional, which
Right.
is a real estate person.
Now, I can understand residents complaining and not liking the idea of the ongoing situation of people having rooms or an additional building in the back of their house that they can rent to anybody and everybody, like people do with their houses, you know. Personally, most of what I've seen, I'd rather have that situation than a house next door to me renting to college kids, you know, 25 at a time. But I think that could be taken care of. I'm not for sure. At one time, you mentioned the fact that maybe we need to think about accepting some of the responsibility for the situation we're in from the city standpoint, and maybe saying, okay, from this point on, this ain't gonna happen anymore, or from up until this particular date, okay. So we've got 10 or 12 people that are, and maybe some of them are breaking the law, maybe some of them aren't. I got a letter, I don't really think I'm breaking the law, but I don't think many people want to stay in my place and not take a shower or have something to eat. But those situations, the situation of the real estate deal and the sales, from 2 or 3 people that I've talked to, has happened over the years. And now in the last year, all of a sudden it's been brought to our attention, and I just think it's, like I say, I think the city has some responsibility in letting that get out of control to begin with.
That's the reason I think, from my side, I'd like to see the ordinance change to allow, if there's room, I mean, it's like any, right now you have to, and it should be, you know, accessory building can only be a certain size, you know, covered area is only a certain much, but keep rules involved that you can't go hog wild, but if we have a person who has a lot and they have a need for an accessory building for their children, to vacation in, or a parent, I'd like to see us to be able to do that. And if we don't want rentals, then let's make it plain in the ordinance how we handle that. That we just don't take a way of trying to handle it by making sure that we can't have accessory buildings, you know, that you can live in or stay in.
Yeah, I think one problem we've had is what we're looking at now, another code enforcement employee. We've been rather lax over the years with the right kind of people to enforce the codes. And consequently, we're all living with that now.
Well, we've also had temporary people, I say temporary because they only work part-time, and they tend to get in a position where they either have another job to go to or they've learned enough about code they can go to another city and be full-time, which leaves us then periods without a code person.
Well, I agree with both of what you've said, and if we're going to have an ordinance, I feel we need to make it strong and we need to follow it. But I also feel that all those people that have currently the accessory buildings where they have been using them or renting them out, and they have gotten approval from the city for everything they've done, should be grandfathered in. We start out from a new chapter in the book with a stronger ordinance, but that is enforced. And, you know, I keep thinking of the family who bought the structure and the realtor informed them that the back building was accessory, their in-laws could stay, and now it's not supposed to be. That's not their fault. That, I feel, is the realtor's fault for misrepresenting them. So I would include them as including in the grandfather clause. But I don't have any problem with getting an ordinance and making it strong, but we have to follow it.
You know, I think it's tough when you say grandfathered in. I don't know, do we know everything that's out there? Is there somebody gonna come out of more than the 8 or whatever? I don't know.
Well, they might if they know that they can be grandfathered in, otherwise they might get fined. So they might come up and say, okay, you forgot me.
I'd frankly rather, instead of grandfather, rewrite the ordinance, like I said, to allow structures where our children, our grandchildren can stay. That would, in essence, do the same thing. But also, if we don't want them rented, let's put some strong words in there that they don't. And some strong language of what you can do with that structure. Well, if I had my mother-in-law living there, and that's what I did, then certainly I might want to rent it, you know, if she passes away. Well, if we can structure our ordinance in such a manner saying, can't rent it, but if, you know, if my neighbor Jerry wants to stay there for a couple of weeks as he's visited me since he's now moved to Atlanta, it's available, but it's not a rental structure.
Well, you saw what the attorney said, and you saw what the planner said.
It's going to be difficult anyway. It's difficult now, Al. That's one reason I'm not too worried about the difficulty of enforcing, because we haven't been able to enforce it now too well. We really haven't.
Well, let me tell you, I've sat here and I've heard people at this podium say that, you know, they're all over town and the city doesn't do, the city aided in what they're able to do, we don't enforce it. And I asked the administrator several weeks ago, I said, you've been here 3 years, I've been here longer than
3 years.
many. But I don't know of any that I could go to and say that this is a accessory apartment. I mean, I didn't know that. And he said he did not either until this list came out. And so I want to share with you some information. Now this is factual. There's 12 properties on this list that were sent letters. And I went back and looked with some help from the building department at what these structures were permitted to do. And I'm gonna take just a minute and I'm gonna share with you and everybody that's interested. But the first one on Canal Parkway was permitted in 2014 for an upgrade to an outbuilding, and it is clearly stated on the permit not to be used, not permitted as an accessory apartment, written on the permit when it was issued. So the owner knew that.
Mm-hmm.
All of these others, built in 1950, no permits issued. No permits issued. Was a greenhouse involved into a guest house. No permits issued except for an electrical upgrade. The one on 5th Street was permitted as a rec room and storage in 2005. No approval for an apartment. The one on 20th Street was permitted for a pool house. It turned into an apartment, but it was not, it was on it says it was permitted. The application was for a pool house. The one on Fortner, no permits at all.
What year was that?
I don't have the year.
Oh,
The one on First Street was permitted. I looked at the application. 2-car garage with second story storage. And on and on. The only city-approved accessory apartment is at 408 7th Street, and that application says that they are putting in a pool house and an accessory apartment. My point being that the city's not at fault. Well, the city's not, this tells me that people say one thing, but they do another. And that's not our place, and we're gonna put ourselves in a position to grandfather something in. We didn't do this. There was no permits issued for any of these, and so if we're gonna now say, well, they're there, and we want to grandfather them in, oh, I can't support that. I mean, they didn't get a permit.
I haven't used the word grandfather. I'm not particularly in
there's-
favor of that. What I am saying though, and I understand that, I agree with that, but that's kind of the reason I brought up the issue of the neighbor on New Mexico that's walling in his unit, his pole barn, because indeed, what happens many times, and I don't think keeping the ordinance like it is, and I don't think we can stop it with the enforcement as far as a code enforcer of stopping an individual that once it's walled in, of coming in, putting a bathroom in and putting this in, can stop them from renting, yes, but are we going to really be able to stop them from using it for their grandparents or so forth? And is that right? At this point in time, has nothing to do with that. We have these situations here. That's a point.
I'm saying it doesn't have anything to do with that.
Well, I'm
That's
sorry.
what it has
It
all
doesn't.
to do with.
What it has to do with all of these right now is that these were brought forward to look at. It's the only thing that has happened with the city that's really, and from what you're showing and what I agree, that the city's been, well, I'm not sure, we haven't caught them, and we have somehow or another, we haven't gotten our real estate people in line to not tell stories that they can use them, that they're there.
Well, Bill, that's not our place to do.
Well, no, but our place also is to help our citizens, and if we can turn around and write an ordinance that if we don't want them rented, fine, but allow our citizens to use their property, to allow their children to stay there. These weren't all changed years ago, and for rental purposes, I don't believe that. That's kind of recent. I think most of them were changed for a family member to either live there or for children to come in and live there. I know, I remember a 2-story down the road on 98. One of the reasons the gentleman asked to have some changes on it and refurbish it was so his family could come in and they'd have places to stay. Well, there's not much difference in that as the family coming in. If I have a big enough lot and I have the room and so forth of building a structure on it to say, I want to use this for my grandkids. And the way we're set now, that can't be done. You have to make it attached to the home. Is there anything wrong with having an accessory structure if it's not rented, that we can't have grandchildren in and live in and have bathrooms in there or shower for them?
Well, you can have bathrooms, you can have showers in an accessory. You can have that in a workshop.
But as an accessory, they're not supposed to sleep out there because it becomes a living, and the way our ordinance reads, it's a living unit, or a unit to live in.
Well, that's not a workshop.
No, sir, but we can't go out and,
No, that's
if
not
I,
a
not a
garden.
workshop, but can I go out and say, okay, I want an accessory building and it's gonna be a living unit, so my grandchildren can come in, or my mother-in-law can live in, and I want bathrooms and so forth in there and a shower? Or does our ordinance allow that now?
No, that's an apartment, that's set up to be an apartment. And it doesn't allow for that. And it's never
That's
allowed
where
for
I'm
that.
saying, that's what I'm saying now is, yes, these have come up. Maybe we weren't in there involved with, only thing we've done is allow it to be built and put 4 walls around it, and people have come in and changed. usage to where it can be used as an apartment lately for rental.
But I mean, there's a list of 12 here. If you, or at least if you would listen to the way it was being presented, that they were, many of them, all throughout the city, that we were overrun with them. And that's just not the case. We have some isolated cases where people have chosen to circumvent the LDR. I mean, that's just really all it amounts to, that they knew the rules.
I'm not putting these people, I'm not asking to put these people on trial that they knew or didn't know the rules. I'm bringing up tonight, do we want to look at the ordinance and make it more useful to our citizens to allow certain things to happen?
Bill, don't you think it's important that when you have documents that show that they didn't get any permits, that then the city all of a sudden needs to try to change everything we're doing for people that don't want to go by the rules?
Well, I think it's important also to take a look at things that have happened and look at the future and see in our society today if it makes sense to also do some adjustments that help our citizens to better use their property. If we need to fine them because they're against the ordinance and we're not going to do anything, I have no problem. We need to enforce our ordinances. That's not what I'm talking about, is enforcement.
All right.
One situation that I saw, the people were told by the realtors that it was fine. This particular building was not permitted. On Fifth Street, was not permitted to have a kitchen. The person that built it, as soon as it was permitted, went in and put a full kitchen in. Okay, that's a few years ago. That's happened, boom, boom, boom. Now the person comes in, deals with the realtor, and the realtor shows it to them as if that's the way it's always been. They don't, some of us have trouble reading the LDR as it is. But
That's certainly not hard to read.
well,
That's certainly not hard to read.
it's not hard to read, but it's hard to
Come
figure
on.
out exactly what the hell it means,
Accessory apartments are prohibited. I don't understand.
Well,
what's so
I'm ready to change the accessory apartments. I want to be able to have my grandkids back there, and if I want to put an oven in there for them to cook, God forbid it. But, I have 10 grandkids. And sometimes they're all there. Well, why? I've got a nice place. I added a little spot that was supposed to be my studio, which turned into more. Everybody here probably knows this story by now and sick of hearing it. But I'm repeating it anyway because I've got a nice place there. So why can't I go out there and put in an oven? Just because the LDR says I can't do that. Well, that's
LDR doesn't say you can't put in an oven.
Well, it says I can't.
LDR says you can't have an detached accessory apartment.
Well, mine's detached. No, I'm not going to change it. But I don't.
I see your hand.
I think I like the idea of being able to use my property within reason. So maybe it's time, I'm feeling that we need to rewrite the LDR that does with that. And I know you're totally against that. But I think I totally agree for a change with Bill on some of the things that he said regarding this. And I don't know what Rex thinks, but I have an idea what Linda thinks. And I think three of us are leaning toward a change of some kind. And because, unfortunately, these people bought this place on Fifth Street and didn't know the difference. Now, what do? Do they come back and sue the
Realtor?
real estate people? I don't know, maybe they do. But you're right to a certain point. Whatever's been done and the permits have been signed, everybody's happy, renting from ear to ear, and everybody pays what they're supposed to pay. and then somebody comes in a year later and adds things that makes it an apartment, which it says here you can't have an apartment. Then, number one, nobody notices that. Nobody says, hey, you can't do that at that particular point, because it's doggone near impossible to enforce. Now, and these poor people that bought this place, you know, it's not the city's fault they bought it, I agree with you. But it's somebody's fault somewhere that allowed this to happen. Our code guy, the best in the world, couldn't have enforced this. Somebody could come in and put a kitchen in. The place is beautiful, looks real nice. But it's an accessory building and an apartment, as it turns out. And now we're telling these people they can't use it. They can't use it for a sick relative or anybody that wants to stay there that's in the family, because it's an accessory apartment. What about that?
Well, I guess
How
one
many
thing is,
people do you think would invest in an accessory apartment for their grandchild to stay in 3 weekends out of the year?
maybe
Not
only
many.
three, but if we allow them to do it, it's better for them to invest in the apartment
But my
than to
point
go out
being-
and build a shed and put
I
stuff
defer
in.
to what the people told us. Surely we understand the enforcement issue that we create when we do that. I mean, there is practically zero way to do that.
I mean, that's true. Even a
And that's what they
benevolent,
told us. So,
even a benevolent dictatorship couldn't do that.
but,
But
anyway,
it's a real.
But if we
real problem.
rewrote it, and, you know what I'm gonna say, allow those people to do what they shouldn't have done, but we have not enforced what was already on the books. But have in our new ordinance a hefty fine that anybody after such and such date is caught doing what we're not wanting them to do, and I'm talking about a hefty fine. That, will it stop everybody? No, it never will, but it might stop a few.
I think,
come on up. I told you I saw you right there. But you pass out.
Try to be respectful. Just want to give you some, I said I'll try to be respectful.
That'll be.
I wanted to, first, Tandy Castro, 408 7th. I'm one of the properties that the mayor mentioned. I want to first talk about why we should allow detached accessory structures. These are facts. They have various labels. Sometimes they're called a guest house, guest quarters, pool house. You might want to Google the definition of a pool house. Bonus space, studio, guest suite, cottage cabana. They have different various and sundry names, but they all function as habitable guest quarters. They're currently allowed in neighboring Gulf County, neighboring Bay County, Panama City Beach, all areas which promote tourism. A few years back, our citizens made it clear they didn't want to see big hotel development here. They wanted us to keep that small town feel. What better way to do that than to allow people to use their property for that purpose? Because of impervious ratios and setback requirements, many areas or lots in Mexico Beach would not even qualify for any type of an accessory structure. So you're talking about a small subset of property in Mexico Beach. In addition, the cost for, as the mayor said, meeting all the building codes, that's not cheap. So unless somebody wants to invest in that, they're not going to go to the trouble to do this. They increase taxable value and therefore taxable revenue to the city. I know that there's been citizens, a couple of citizens who have come up here and said that they fear for their safety. We actually were hosting a statistician from Purdue University, and he saw the meeting on the local TV channel, and we laughed about it. He said he's a statistician, so he guessed he could have bored her to death. But he was absolutely no fear, nothing that, not anyone she should be afraid of. But there's not a shred of evidence to support the claims that somehow this is going to cause safety concerns or, there goes the neighborhood. There's just no evidence to support that. In Mexico Beach, a property owner can build a pole barn almost as large as their entire structure, 16 feet high, for all their recreational vehicles. And they can store whatever they want to under that pole barn in a residential area. That's acceptable. A property owner can build a workshop almost as large as their house, and they can run power tools from 6:30 a.m. until 10 p.m. at night. That's acceptable. That's an acceptable detached structure. A property owner can have as many sheds on their property as they wish. That's acceptable. A property owner can turn their property into a multi-dwelling property by adding a full dwelling unit, which is an accessory apartment. And I know, Mel, you know this, there's a difference between an accessory apartment, that's a dwelling unit, and the dwelling unit is defined in our LDR. So what we're talking about are not accessory apartments. But a property owner wishing to add to their property a detached habitable guest quarters for their family and friends, that's not allowed. And we're a tourism community. It just doesn't make walking around sense. You guys learned, just like I did in your elected official training, that laws are written for people who are going to obey the law. You don't write laws for the people who aren't going to obey the law. Police chief knows this. If you're not going to obey the law, you're not going to obey the law. Our LDR says you have to have a permit from the city to do any electrical or plumbing improvements in your home. People all over this city don't get a permit for electrical and plumbing upgrades. They just don't. But you're going to have people who aren't going to follow the rules. You're going to have people who add on rooms to their primary structure without a permit. And the city has to catch them unless a neighbor calls them in. I mean, to say that you're not going to do the right thing for property owners because you've got to enforce something or because somebody may violate it, that, again, doesn't make walking around sense to me. Laws are for people who are going to keep the law. The list that the mayor has, that's the list that we gave the city. And those are the ones that we knew about. People that were either advertised in real estate listings. We worked with the property appraiser's office, and they told us the ones that they had on their list. But there are others. But we, as I told Mel when I handed in the list, we didn't feel it was our responsibility to turn in people who had them but had not been advertised. So there are others. So I just think it's crazy that we don't allow those types of structures, but we allow any other type of accessory structure that you may want to have. As far as grandfathering people in, I'm not going to talk about my specific case, but I will say this. There's overwhelming evidence to support we did all the right things and we tried to do all the right things and get all the right permits, including our VRBO license from the city 2 years in a row. And you can talk about the labels, but the only label we actually put on any document was the one that Mel signed for all the hardscapes, which clearly labeled them Cottage 1 and Cottage 2. I don't know if grandfathering in is the right thing, but I think it's pretty easy. We're a small city. You could send a letter out to everyone letting them know that the city is looking at habitable detached structures. And if you have one, if you don't have a permit and a certificate of occupancy, you need to come to the city and get it. And the building department can go inspect it. And if they didn't get a permit, then they need to apply for a permit and have it inspected and make sure it meets Florida Building Code and it's safe as a habitable structure. That's an easy problem to solve. If you don't want to just grandfather in, you don't know what you're grandfathering in, that's easy to solve. You know, you have people come up there and apply for the proper permits and have them inspected. The law is not clear. The LDR is not clear. I know I've heard the city attorney, his position on it. Our attorney, who's well respected in the county, has talked to other municipal attorneys who disagree and say it's not clear what's allowed and what's not allowed. When this started 10 months ago, the mayor's comments publicly were that it started out, you can't sleep there. That was the first comment. Then later he said, you could put a cot out there and nap if you wanted to. Then it evolved to, you could have a Murphy bed out there to sleep on occasion. And then the last statement was, you can put a bed out there and use it for sleeping quarters, but that can't be the primary function. No wonder there's so much confusion about what's allowed and what's not. There is a difference between an accessory apartment and a habitable guest quarters. And from the very beginning, we were told by the city a decade ago, and again recently, you can't have a kitchen. That's the difference. So I just think that they should be allowed. I think that this whole notion that you shouldn't allow them because people might violate the law, it doesn't even make sense. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Lisa Wilkerson. I am the owner at 122 Fifth Street. So I hear a lot. I just wanted to point out that we are not going out to deceive anybody. We were completely deceived, and I know that doesn't fix the situation, but we are desperately trying to work with the city to correct the situation that we're in. We are pursuing other avenues with the seller and realtor and all that, but we're in a mess. I purchased the home so that my father could live in the home when we move here, and I am moving here in 3 years as soon as my son graduates, but I'm just in a mess. And I mean, we're even looking at trying to buy property next door to split the units. I've talked to the city this week. I've talked to many of you. And so I just want you to know, not everybody's out to deceive and do things. I welcome any of you to come in my property and offer any suggestions on what we can do to correct it. So I just wanted to give you that side because we're trying to work with you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. McLaughlin, you have a suggestion on moving forward?
Well, again, my suggestion is that we either rewrite or amend the LDR for this section that allows accessory, whether it's apartments or a living unit, to be separated from the home. I think that would frankly take in any of the grandfathering in. Certainly, if a building doesn't meet building code, that is basically a separate issue. It doesn't meet building code, for instance, like the greenhouse you were talking about. They want electric, and I think it kind of got shut down at that point in time. It'd been many years that way, but when someone finally looked at it and said, ain't code, it got stopped. And I think those that aren't will be stopped in the same situation. I just don't see that there's a real problem having an accessory building. The second issue then is, do we allow it, or do we put something in that allows it to be rented, or do we put high restrictions on what you have to do before you can be, it can be rented? That's, I think, a separate issue. I don't, at this point in time in our society and our needs and being able to use our property, I don't see there's a reason, if we have a lot that will accept a separate structure to allow children or whatever to stay in, and we have the money to build it, and we go to the city and it's built to code, why can't we? For many of these that people are talking about grandfathering in, if we allowed them, that probably would allow them to be in position. If they don't meet code, then that's a problem.
Having heard what you've heard and have heard before, is there anything different other than what you wrote us, I guess now a month ago, I don't know, do you have a suggestion of either submitting to us in writing a rewrite of this, or we need to have a workshop? I think you've heard enough to know that there's a movement to have accessory structures, whether or not we rent them or not. I didn't hear a lot of favoritism toward being able to rent them, but I did hear that we want to look at allowing accessory apartments detached.
Right. The prior ordinance that I worked on, is stated at draft level. It emphasized that the person who would be occupying that accessory building had to be a relative. What I've heard, and that's very hard to enforce because it's hard to keep up with exactly who's there day to day. What I've heard tonight is more of a conversation about simply allowing that accessory building to be used as a sleeping quarters. That's a lot simpler to handle as far as an enforcement issue, trying to get people to follow the rules but give them some latitude to do more with their property. That would involve some degree of rewriting, but it's 100% a policy decision. It's up to all of you. But that would be easier for your staff and your legal to work with and enforce going forward than the restriction specifically about it needing to be a certain relative, because that just, it's a messy determination to make sometimes, and you just don't always know
And
who's
the
who.
rental part would be handled by just simply that they're not allowed to be rent. I mean, do you just, is that just as simple language as you put in it?
You could make that rule. There's been some conversation that you cannot regulate under state law vacation rentals, but our view, my entire law firm's view, is when it's a rule on an accessory structure, you can place those types of restrictions. You cannot tell somebody anymore that they can't rent their house. So if you were to go the direction of a no rental, do keep in mind that when your relative stays at your accessory building for a few months, even if they're not paying you, that's technically a rental. I think what you're probably focused on is a rental for compensation. And you may want to think about, instead of an outright ban, you may want to think about a term. Maybe you don't mind if it's a long-term situation. But they're just policy questions. They're totally up to you.
Could you, or maybe Mel, I guess if we had trying to think how to say this. I don't want to just sit here and tell you to write us something and then we rewrite it 5 times trying to figure out what we really want. I don't want to do that.
Right.
Like we've done before. So I would like to either narrow down by each of us submitting what we want in it, or have another discussion with maybe some checklist, a list of things that would be appropriate to decide on before we give it to the attorney. Maybe
Get the information that you want in there to me, and I'll give it to him as to what.
yeah, and maybe we should discuss it again once before
That's
we.
very appropriate.
I'm just trying to think of a mechanical way to do this to
A
keep
quicker
from.
way.
Sure, right?
And so right now, everything's on hold.
Yeah, it's going to be. I mean,
Citywide.
we don't have anything.
There's nothing on hold now.
Well-
There's nothing on hold.
Well, you can't do
But we're
anything.
going towards writing something that we're all comfortable with. And I personally don't have a problem with renting. I'm right between two. On one side, one of them is listed on the sheet.
Well, I would
Believe
ask,
me, I never see the rental. It's very
But we can
quiet.
decide that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get us in a mode of what is it that we want to see in the ordinance before we just say, send us something, and then we look at it and say, oh, wait a minute, no, no, I don't want
Should
to
we
do that
let
again.
Mel know? Send Mel
A
an
couple
email?
of key points to consider is
Yeah.
whether you'd be in favor of allowing any kind of rental, whether you'd be in favor of allowing short-term rentals, and then if you want to place some kind of restriction on how many of these buildings you could have. I mean, if you've got a big enough lot, is it fine to have 5 or 6, or do you just want to set it as one?
or
Or
one. I'm sorry.
Mel, is it appropriate, based on your hearing of this discussion, to send us a checklist of things that maybe just as simple as what he's just said, so that we can give you feedback?
Sure, kind of like a starting point.
A starting point of, look, and then we can, before you send it anywhere, so that we all know what we all sent you, condense it into something and send it again. or either we can have and we can discuss it again.
Okay.
How's that?
Yeah,
I think
I
so.
would, I'd
Does
bring it
that make
back.
sense?
I'd
Is
bring
that
it back
a good,
to.
I'm trying to
right.
ask, is that a good way to move forward?
Bring it back to another meeting. I wouldn't just recirculate the results. But if you handle it at the meeting and it's the materials for the meeting, that's fine.
That's what I mean, bring it to if it's not the next meeting, when we get it, we give you some feedback, bring it to the meeting, we can discuss it. And that way it'll be on the agenda, and people see what's.
I would ask one thing, and that's, in essence, it's an easy, I'm not trying to complicate, that we kind of look at two things, really, the accessory, if we're going to have one, whatever we want to call it, and then rental as a separate type thing. Because we can get tied up on, are we going to rent it, aren't we going to rent it? It goes kind of
Well, we
together.
are gonna get tied up.
Yes, we will, but I still would like to see
I mean,
it. Two different
You can
issues.
rent it, or
Well, just a quick point. So if we treated them totally separately and passed a rule that said, okay, now it's okay, you can sleep in these units. We don't have any rules on the book about rental of those units, so they would be allowed. That's where we'd fall if we didn't address the rental also.
It's got to be addressed, I agree.
Well, what's wrong with me going and talking to Mel and writing down my things, and then you guys coming in later and talking to Mel?
There's
and
nothing.
writing
He's
down
just
his
gonna
things?
send us out, here's some starting points for consideration. We're gonna send that to him, but then he's gonna bring that back to the meeting. So it's done openly.
You're always allowed to talk to Mel between meetings and give your input. We just don't have unofficial votes between.
That's right. And I understand. Thank you. That's a valid point, because we would get asked about that, and we should. Okay, I'm sure you wrote all that down. Okay, all right, we're gonna move on then.
Yes.
First of all, you think? Yes, ma'am, please do.
My name is Lynn Tuttle, and I live at 2501 Highway 98 down here on the beach. I'm kind of a newbie here, but a couple weeks ago, I went to a planning and zoning committee meeting, and they unanimously said they didn't go along with this. I haven't heard anything about anybody talking about the results that they submitted to you people, where they said they didn't think it was a good idea. Do you listen to your planning and zoning committee, or is it just they make a decision?
It's a valid point, ma'am. Thank you for reminding us. But I can't, I mean, you're right. We did send that to them. We got it back. And they're an advisory group, with due respect. And the buck
nothing-
stops at this table, and evidently that's something we didn't agree with.
I can tell you, for one, I did not agree with it.
Well, I can tell you that I was also on zoning at one time, and there's a lot of times that we said, we think it should be this way, and the group that set up here at that time says, nah, not quite.
But they are your advisory.
They're an
They're
advisory
just an
group.
advisory,
Yeah.
that's all they are. So, I mean, and they're aware of that,
And
and
we
we sent it
listen.
to them, and they gave us their opinion, and we had different opinions. Simple as that.
So that, what they decided really didn't hold any water.
If I could,
Not with me, no.
if I could interject,
Yes.
they were given the ordinance where it mentioned the relatives and family members, and that's what they ruled upon. They didn't rule upon anything besides that.
I'm
other
sorry, I
words-
missed the first part of that.
They only ruled on what the ordinance was that was given to them to consider. That was the ordinance where it had the relatives and things of that sort, and they decided that was not a good plan to go. They didn't have any more discussion besides that.
Okay, one other thing. These people who are now renting out their places or having people stay in their accessory buildings, whatever, they are in violation of the law. Is that right?
They're in violation of the LDR, that is correct.
Why can't they be shut down?
Well, we sent them a letter advising them, the ones that we were aware of, that they're in violation of the LDR and they're not to be. And we put them on notice, if you would, that the city is aware, or we think that, you have an accessory apartment dwelling unit.
Well,
And
some you know about. You absolutely know.
That is correct, and they were told not to do that. So
So they were told to shut it down?
they were told, not right, they can't use it for that purpose as a apartment.
And have they shut it down?
Well, I don't know the answer. I mean, I don't know if they have or not.
Things may have changed, but as of several weeks ago, the locations that the city was aware of, they weren't currently being rented, so there wasn't really something to do at that point.
But rented or used. I mean,
Or
if
slept
they
in.
exist.
Exactly. It's actually not, you're exactly right. The threshold is not rental versus non-rental. It's use as a sleeping quarter.
Some of these places are being advertised on the internet?
Well, they know if they are, they know that they shouldn't do that.
So you as a group can't do any more?
Well, I don't search the internet for them. I mean, just
No,
speak for
no.
me. I don't know who they are. I mean, I don't know that.
No.
But if we are aware of them, we sent them a letter, certified letter, so they know that they're not to use their, quote, detached efficiency apartment or,
But like you say, there are 10 or 12 around the city who are doing this.
Not are necessarily.
okay. We sent them a letter, we put them on notice that if they're one of the ones that are doing it, that they have to cease.
Okay.
Okay, fair enough, thank you.
Thank you for listening.
You're welcome. Is there any miscellaneous?
I hope not.
The only thing that I'll say, Your Honor, is, our code enforcement officer is now done with the city. Her last day was Monday. We did advertise for a replacement. That comes down the end of this week, even though I'll be gone Thursday and Friday with a little surgery thing I got going on. Adrian has been instructed, even though he doesn't work for me, he works for you, to go ahead and get the interviews for next week for the replacement for the code enforcement officer. We have, I think, 3 or 4 applications so far, and so we'll interview those next week. And hopefully, it might be someone who could start pretty quick, and they'll have to hit the ground running.
And before we leave the topic of the structures, accessory apartments, we will plan to put that on the next agenda, assuming that we'll have some time to get some input back from you and us give you something back.
I'd like to think that next week is an important week for this type of thing, yes, sir.
Okay, so is that good?
Good.
And
Okay.
You're looking for something along the lines of bullet points, not an ordinance for a first reading.
No, just bullet points to make sure that, I guess, food for thought, and what do we want it to say? All right, I'm sorry, miscellaneous? No.
Nothing.
Rex, surely you've got something.
No, he didn't say anything on that.
All right, is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Thank you everyone for coming.